Housing markets are often seen as unpredictable, but economic theory suggests that property prices and land values might follow a discernible cycle. One of the most widely discussed patterns in real estate economics is the 18.6-year land cycle, popularized by economists like Fred Harrison and Phil Anderson. This theory suggests that real estate values rise and fall in predictable phases over approximately 18 to 20 years. In this video, I will explain the 18.6-year land cycle and its phases, provide historical evidence of the cycle in Australia and the US, explore the economic and behavioural reasons for the cycle's recurrence, and consider critiques and limitations of the 18.6-year land cycle theory. Defining the 18.6-year land cycle. The 18.6-year land cycle theory suggests that the property market experiences predictable phases, generally moving from recovery after a downturn to a 7-year period of expansion with a mid-cycle slowdown, followed by another 7-year period leading up to the peak and ending in a 4-year period of recession or bust. This cycle, experts argue, reflects human behaviour, economic policies, the bank's lending practices, and the unique characteristics of land as an investment. Origins of the theory. British economist Fred Harrison brought significant attention to the 18.6-year cycle by studying historical real estate patterns. His research found that from the 19th century onwards, land values in the US and UK followed a roughly 18-year cyclical pattern, and in recent years this cycle has gained attention in both the US and Australia, where economists like Phil Anderson has observed that housing and land markets often follow this rhythmic pattern. Phases of the 18.6-year land cycle. According to the theory, the cycle can be broken down into 4 primary phases. Recovery phase. Following a bust, the market begins to stabilize, and we see a 7-year period where housing prices start to rise gradually, fueled by low interest rates and economic recovery. Some characteristics you see are increased buyer confidence, rising but moderate property values, and early stage investment. And towards the end of this 7-year period, there is typically a 1 to 2 year mid-cycle slowdown or correction, which then leads into the expansion phase. During this 7-year expansion, property values accelerate and construction and investment pick up significantly. This phase is typically marked by strong economic growth. Some characteristics to look for are rapidly rising home prices, low unemployment, high demand, and speculative interest. And this leads into the last 2 years of the expansion, which is the peak of the cycle, commonly known as the winner's curse. And this is when the market reaches its peak as house prices soar, often driven by speculative buying. As the bubble grows, prices become unsustainable and affordability issues surface. Some characteristics to look for are exponential price increases, high levels of debt and speculation, and signs of market overheating. And that is when we see banks start to fail and call in loans and unemployment rates start to rise, putting even more pressure on the economy. Recession or bust phase. Following this peak, the market undergoes a correction as prices fall, demand weakens, and the economy slows. This phase can result in foreclosures, reduced property values, and a tightening of credit. Some characteristics to look for are falling prices, bank failures, increased foreclosures, reduced construction, and an economic slowdown. Number 3, historical evidence of the 18.6-year land cycle in Australia and the US. In the US, evidence of the 18.6-year cycle appears in multiple real estate booms and busts over the past century. Post-World War II in early 20th century, the US experienced booms and crashes in the early 1900s, notably the Florida land boom of the 1920s, followed by a severe crash that coincided with the Great Depression. Post-World War II to 1970s, after World War II, the housing market boomed, supported by suburban expansion and economic growth. This was followed by downturns in the 1970s due to rising interest rates and oil crisis. The 1980s saw another real estate estate boom and bust and the 2000s housing bubble culminating in the 2008 financial crisis also fits within this cyclical pattern. The Australian housing market, while somewhat less volatile than the US, has displayed cyclical characteristics that align with the 18.6-year cycle. 1970s to 1990s, Australia experienced real estate growth during the late 1980s, followed by a recession in the early 1990s. This was part of a broader economic downturn, partly influenced by rising interest rates. The Australian housing market experienced sustained growth in the early 2000s, with price increases in cities like Sydney and Melbourne. Although Australia largely avoided the 2008 GFC, the market slowed by 2019, followed by a mid-cycle COVID-19 induced dip and then a rapid price surge, leading us into the peak of this cycle in 2026. Why the 18.6-year cycle repeats? The recurring nature of the land cycle can be explained by a mix of economic, social and psychological factors. Unlike other assets, land is finite and its value often appreciates due to limited supply, particularly in urban centers. This scarcity drives periodic booms. As property values rise, investors and buyers often engage in speculative behavior, anticipating further appreciation. This leads to bubbles as buyers bid prices beyond sustainable levels. Credit availability often expands during growth phases, allowing more people to borrow. As credit contracts, however, prices can drop, leading to busts. Policy responses and interest rates. Governments and central banks such as the US Federal Reserve and the Reserve Bank of Australia play a key role in influencing the cycle through monetary policy. Lower interest rates encourage borrowing and investment, fueling growth, whereas higher rates can restrict borrowing and slow down the housing market. And government policies around lending, taxation, and housing development impact market cycles. For instance, in Australia, high levels of investor activity and tax policies favouring property investments have contributed to property value increases. Number 5, practical applications of the 18.6-year cycle. Understanding the 18.6-year cycle can be useful for investors, policymakers, and consumers in both Australia and the US. For investors, recognizing the phases of the cycle can help investors make informed decisions, buying during recovery phases and exercising caution during peaks. For policymakers, awareness of cyclical trends can guide policies aimed at stabilizing housing markets, such as implementing lending restrictions during speculative phases. For home buyers and sellers, knowing where the market might be in the cycle can help consumers decide when to buy or sell, potentially avoiding peak prices or investing at lower prices during recovery. The 18.6-year land cycle offers valuable insights into the repetitive patterns observed in housing markets across the US and Australia. While not without limitations, this theory helps explain why housing booms and busts seem to occur in a recurring rhythm shaped by economic, social, and policy factors. Understanding these cycles can help individuals and institutions make more informed decisions. In the final part of this series, we'll explore how to predict future housing market trends by integrating knowledge of cycles and economic indicators, technological influences, and global factors. This final video will provide practical approaches for understanding what might happen next in the housing markets of Australia and the United States.